Imposter syndrome. Everybody's got it. Nobody wants it. So what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you. A couple of things to figure out about imposter syndrome because so many people call me and we talk about it and it seems worthy of consideration. So one thing to know is everybody literally has imposter syndrome. It's just kind of baked right in. For example, I was just doing some reading online just a little while ago, and like Albert Einstein had imposter syndrome. I even wrote down a little quote. He said, this is a quote from Einstein. He said, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler." So like if Einstein has imposter syndrome, everybody probably does, right? Even Maya Angelou. So I wrote down a quote from her. She said, "I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out," right? So like Einstein, Maya Angelou, you, me, everybody has imposter syndrome. But rather than having that be something that stands in your way and acts as a barrier to forward progress, let's talk about how to translate that into something that actually can be like a blueprint for success. Like how can you take imposter syndrome as a web designer and leverage that to become even more successful than you otherwise would be? That's what we'll talk about today. So in order to get there, though, I want to talk about a couple things. First, what the deal is with imposter syndrome and why it's there in the first place. Then we'll talk a little bit about the solution to kind of break through it. And then we'll wrap things up by giving you like a really practical example of how you can take imposter syndrome and actually use that to drive even more success in your business and in your life. So starting at the beginning, it's just born there. That's the thing. It's like it's just baked right in. And the reason that it's baked right in is because imposter syndrome really at the core is very little more than just fear of social embarrassment, right? Or just being humiliated in public, something like that. And it's just kind of baked right in. It's like everybody has it. In fact, there's a study that I was looking at the other day. It was the Chapman University Survey of American Fears. And the number one fear on the list of fears was public speaking. And death didn't even make the top 10. It was like public speaking, fear of heights, and like scary bugs and stuff like that. But the crazy thing about that is, like, if you go to a funeral, it seems like you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. It's crazy, right? But it's like the fear of public speaking was the number one fear out of all of those things. And it comes back down to just the fear of being embarrassed in public and social humiliation and all of that stuff. And that's kind of what imposter syndrome is all about, that you're trying to meet these expectations and people are kind of counting on you. And maybe if you can't pull through this time, then you get embarrassed in front of everybody who's watching. So that's kind of the idea behind it. But it's impossible to not have it. Almost impossible. It's not entirely impossible. I mean, but have you ever met a person who was like, "I'm the perfect person. I'm always at the top of my game. I'm floating above the top of my game. I'm at the tippity top and there's nothing new to learn. No one is better than I am. I know all of the things. I hit grand slams off of every pitch. And my only problem is my wallet is too small to hold all my 20s or something like that, right? It's like, you never meet anybody like that. And if you did, you wouldn't be friends. It's like, that would probably just be somebody you wouldn't want to be around, right? So what that means is decent people, like almost every decent person out there, has to deal with this concept of imposter syndrome, which is the fear of not being able to perform at the level that you used to, or being able to repeat a past success, or being able to meet an expectation from someone, or something like that. And most of the time, it's just in your mind. It's not really even true. It's just in your mind. And so there's a solution to overcome it, right? So now I'm talking about imposter syndrome, not actually being an imposter. So if you feel like you're a legit person and you've got good skills and you can do good stuff and you've had success in the past and those types of things, you'll still experience imposter syndrome, just like Albert Einstein and just like Maya Angelou and just like you and just like me and just like everybody, because it's baked in. It's just baked into the way your brain works. And so there's a solution though. And there's a couple of steps to the solution to overcome imposter syndrome. So let's go through the solution. And then after we get through the solution, I'm going to give you like a practical example of how you can implement this solution in your own life to make significant forward progress in your business and anything else that you're trying to pursue where you feel like imposter syndrome might be standing in the way. So the solution, now this is one of the one of the biggest life hacks, if you want to call it that I have ever discovered is the first step of this solution. And it's the concept of giving versus taking, or the concept of humility. And one of the things that comes up when I start talking about this is sometimes people understand humility as to be self-deprecating, and that you have to criticize yourself or insult yourself or think badly about yourself in order to be humble. And that's not true. It's not true at all. It's possible to think that you're pretty decent at doing some stuff, but humility comes from just not thinking about yourself at all and thinking about the other people, like thinking about loving and serving and giving to other people while not thinking about yourself, even while recognizing that you're pretty good at some stuff, right? So that's the concept of humility. And the biggest life hack that I've really ever discovered is that when you learn to love and serve other people rather than trying to get other people to love you, it's like this instant off switch for anxiety and stress and all of that stuff that might come in these social situations where you might be afraid of embarrassing yourself in front of other people or not being able to perform at the level that you want. And this is something that I face regularly in life, like on a regular basis, because I constantly find myself in situations where I feel like I have to perform at a very high level all the time, right? It's like I'm in a band, and so like if you're playing music and stuff, it's like you can't blow that. Like everybody's gonna know it, right? Or doing coding or something like that, or just whatever. Like whatever area of life that you're in, like I just constantly find myself feeling like I've got to do a lot. Like I have to perform at a high level. But here's the hack. Up until I discovered this, I used to feel like I had to, like, say it was music. Say I wrote a song and I was going to perform a song and stuff like that, because I enter in like songwriter competitions and stuff like that too. And suppose I were to do something like that and then perform the song. Well, it's tempting to think, well, I have to do a really good job because I want people to like me. I want people to like the song. I want to earn the love of the audience. And that's stressful, because then you think, well, what if I blow it? And then I'm embarrassed in front of everyone, and then they don't like me, and then they boo me, and they throw tomatoes at me and all that stuff, right? Well, here's the hack. I stopped thinking about that. I stopped thinking I'm not trying to take or earn the love of the audience. Instead, I'm trying to give the love to the audience. Like I'm just trying to, what can I do to love and serve the people in my life at the highest level that I can all of the time, regardless if it's reciprocated. Like even if they don't love me back, I still want to put forth the best that I can do to love and serve other people. So whether it's in the context of playing the song, it's like, hey, I'm going to play the song the best I can because I want them to enjoy the song, because I want to give to them rather than I want to take the respect or earn the love from them. And that shift is huge. It's basically getting out of this me-centered mindset and having this others-centered mindset. And that is a huge life hack in pretty much any area, and especially with web design, right? It's like, I'm just going to do the best that I can to provide the best outcome and the best results, and just to love and serve the people in my life, whether it's your clients or whether it's the audience at a performance or whether it's your family or your friends or just in every area of your life. If you get out of that me-centered mindset and start putting yourself in the other-centered mindset, that does a lot. That's a huge off switch to the stress and the anxiety that kind of comes, especially from this concept of imposter syndrome that we're talking about. So that's step one, the giving versus taking, like getting out of the me-centered mindset, focusing on the other-centered mindset, and then saying, what can I do to love and serve other people, regardless of whether or not it's reciprocated. Then step two is the concept of mentors versus competitors. This is the idea where you look at other people and sometimes you think, oh, well, I'm not as good as they are. They're so much better than I am. I'll never be as good as they are. If I try to be like them, then I'm an imposter, right? So this is one of the sources of imposter syndrome, where you see other people and you think, well, I'm not as good as they are, and therefore I'm just, I'm maybe not good at all. But that's the unhealthy way to look at other people for a couple of reasons. And it could be in other areas of life too. Like it could just be regular on social media. It's like everybody knows that when you look out on social media, you're not seeing real people. Like even your friends and stuff, they're just posting the highlights of their life and pictures with the best lighting and, all the good things that happen to them most of the time. Nobody posts their everyday humdrum life, right? It's like, and then you think, okay, well, I'm going to compare my everyday life to the highlights of everyone else's life. And you'll say, well, my everyday life isn't as strong or cool as the highlights of theirs. And so therefore they must be better than me and having this better life. And, woe is me, all this other stuff, right? So it's like this competitor thing. And everybody knows in social media you can't win because everybody posts the best stuff in their life. But it's also true in business. It's like, you might look at somebody and be like, wow, they've got, 200,000 followers on YouTube or something like that. But maybe you don't pay attention to the fact that they've been doing it for like 10 years or something like that to get to that point, or whatever, whatever the history is. Or maybe they're working, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get there and have sacrificed all the relationships in their family or something like that. You don't know. You don't know what the history is. And so better than saying, look, that person is so much better than I am. I'll never be able to get to that level, and therefore I'm an imposter. Instead of having that competitor concept, like, well, I'm competing, like this person's better than that person, that kind of, instead of having the competitor mindset, set it up as a mentorship mindset, right? Where you find somebody in some area that you would like to admire and follow in their footsteps, like that you hold them in high respect. And say, look, that guy does an awesome job with his Instagram site or whatever. That guy does an awesome job with his YouTube channel. That guy does a great job with web design, whatever it might be. And you can have multiple mentors, so to speak. And what you end up doing is you say, what can I do to be closer to the way that person is doing this area of their life, right? So like if you're really impressed with somebody's web design, you would say, what can I do to increase my web design skills so that they're closer to this kind of heroes or this mentor's web design skills, right? And so it's not a competitor thing. It's just kind of setting goals and be like, I want to be kind of like that guy. Like that guy does a good job. And then you can look back and say, what can I do to make an incremental improvement in my life today that would push me one step closer to being like that guy? That's somebody that you admire. And that's a very healthy way to shift this competitor mindset where you feel like, oh, well, I have imposter syndrome if I'm trying to be like that guy, but I'm not, right? So like, say you want to be like Tony Robbins or something like that and be super influential and help people and whatever. And you say, well, I'm not Tony Robbins. I could never be him. And so then you think, well, if I try to present myself as if I am, then I'm an imposter, right? And so you have this weird competitor thing going on. You instantly realize you're the loser in the competition because you pick somebody that's way, way up there, and you think, well, I'll never be like that, and then you feel weird about it. But instead of that, you could just pick some people that you really admire and be like, what can I do to get my game up to the level of their game? Like, what would be an incremental step? But it could be it could be in sports. You could look at like Michael Jordan, for example, and be like, I want to play basketball like Michael Jordan. What can I do to elevate my game so that it's closer to Michael Jordan's than it is today? Now, will you ever get to be as good as Michael Jordan? Like, nobody is. Like, he's probably the greatest of all time basketball players ever. And so you'll probably never get to the point where you're better than Michael Jordan, right? Especially if you're just playing recreationally. But you can look at Michael Jordan and say, wow, he's doing some cool stuff. What if I started implementing some of the things I see him doing in my game? And now I'm making these incremental steps to getting better. And that's the third step. So the third step is the incremental step part. So the three steps, and that we're kind of getting ahead of myself, but the first step was the concept of the giving versus taking, like having the other-centered mindset. The second step is rather than competing with people and feeling like you're inadequate because you're not as good as they are, set them up as mentors that you're taking steps to become more like over time. And then the third one is this incremental improvements idea. And this is the idea where you're never going to go from where you are today to surpassing Michael Jordan in one step, right? Or you're never going to go from where you are today to being better at web design than your web design hero is in one step. It's too big. So what you end up doing is you take these incremental steps. Like you think to yourself, what is a relatively small thing that I could do today that would get me one step closer to where I want to be? Right? And so you chunk that down. And then once you accomplish that, you take another step. But here's the key. It's not just about taking the steps. It's about recognizing the incremental improvement as you're taking the steps. Because one of the things that's tempting is you might think, okay, well, I did all this stuff. I've learned this incremental thing, but look, I'm still not as good as that guy. Like I didn't make it, so you can think of that step as, well, that's just not enough. I'm failing to achieve the desired outcome that I want. And therefore you give up because you're focusing on the end result. But instead of focusing on the end result, focus on where you were yesterday and how this incremental improvement means I'm better than I was yesterday. And tomorrow, when I make another incremental improvement, I'll be better tomorrow than I am today. And when you make kind of these small incremental improvements, you're unstoppable. Like that is really the key. And I'm going to tell you something that is, something that I felt like would stand in my way, and how the incremental improvements has made a huge difference. And one of the things is reading speed. So I remember when I was going to school, I was in this honors program for like advanced English and everything like that. And I wasn't really interested in English all that much. Like my real strong suit tends to be like math and science and stuff and music and stuff like that. And I just wasn't really interested in like novels and literature, but I wanted to go and take this course anyway. And so I kind of enrolled myself in honors English and literature. And we had to read 100 pages a day in this course. It was like a lot, but I don't read very fast. Like it takes me like maybe 2 or 3 minutes to get through a page. And I was embarrassed by that because everyone else seems to be able to read a page in like 1 minute. So like if we were reading like 100 pages a day, they could be done in like 100 minutes. That's just like an hour and a half, a little more than an hour and a half. Whereas it would take me like 5-6 hours and then I'd be falling asleep and be too tired to keep going. But here's the thing. It's like part of the reason it takes me so long to read is because I'll be reading and then I'll see a phrase or a word, and then I'll start thinking about the phrase or the word rather than continuing on reading. Like for example, just the other day I was reading and I saw the phrase tide me over. Like, I'm going to do this to tide me over. Or you might even hear somebody say, hey, I'm just going to have a quick snack to tide me over until dinner. So like I'm reading that and I think to myself, what does that even mean? Tide me? Is it tie me over or tide me over? What does that even mean? I don't know what that means. So then I had to go look it up and then figure out what all that stuff is about. And that's how my brain works. It's like I go kind of granular and I want to make sure I kind of understand all the steps along the way. And that actually is a really strong benefit because here's the thing. Once I finish reading something, it's locked. Like it's in there. Like I know it, usually after just one pass. But it usually takes me 3 times longer to get through it. And it's because I keep digging in, like this whole tide me over thing. Well, I'll tell you what, just if you want to know, here's what the tide me over thing means. Tide me over, it's actually T-I-D-E, me over. It's an old sailing analogy where if the wind completely dies and you can't sail from one place to the next, what you can do is you can just ride the tide from where you are to where you want to be, right? So you can get from one place to another by way of the tide rather than by way of the wind. Obviously, that's not an ideal way to get from one place to the next, but that's the whole point of the analogy. It's not the best way, but it'll do for now. So I researched all that, right? to try to figure it all out. And, consequently, it just takes me a long time to read through things. So rather than being kind of embarrassed by the fact that it takes me a longer time to read through things, I choose to believe that I'm actually doing a good job because it's the grit, right? It's the perseverance. You don't have to be genius. You just have to not give up. You just make these incremental improvements over time. And that makes it's an unstoppable thing, right? So you don't have to be Albert Einstein or Maya Angelou to crush it in some field. What you need to do is you need to make incremental improvements on a steady basis, on a consistent basis over time, and you will be unstoppable. And that is really the essence for the solution to overcoming imposter syndrome. It's having that others-focused rather than the me-centered mindset. Then you think about, okay, this whole concept of mentors versus competitors. Well, rather than competing with everybody and feeling inadequate, set the people that you idolize as mentors to emulate. And then you think, well, what can I do in terms of the incremental improvements? What can I do to take one step closer to the people I want to be like? And you can have lots of them. You can have different people in different areas of your life. And then you make the incremental improvements. Now, here's the blueprint. So that was kind of theoretical. Let's get practical. So the practical implementation of how you take this solution and do something with it is this. Suppose you're feeling imposter syndrome as a web designer because you've never had a client where you've really helped them add a lot of revenue to their business. Maybe that's what you're thinking, right? Because you could be thinking all kinds of things, but let's just take that as an example. And you think to yourself, man, I wish I had a client who could say that I helped them add $100,000 to their business, like some kind of big chunk of money like that, right? If I could do that, then I'd really feel like I was something. But because I haven't done that yet, I kind of feel like I have this imposter syndrome, especially if you're really kind of pushing the marketing side of your business. Okay, so that's the problem, right? So then you're thinking about that and you're feeling imposter syndrome over that idea. So what can you do about it? Well, the first thing to do is think to yourself, well, what if I did have a client where I helped them add over $100,000 of revenue to their business? Like, suppose I had that, what would be some of the things that I would be doing for that client? And then you might start making a list. Like maybe I would be doing email marketing, and I would be improving my copywriting skills and building funnels and like all of these different things. You make a list of the things that you would be doing if you had a client who could say, that you helped them add $100,000 to their business. Then you say, okay, now I've got this list of things that I would be doing if I had a client like that. And then you look at the list and say, well, which of these things can I already do? And maybe you're already good at copywriting or something like that, but you haven't really focused too much on email marketing. And so then you think, okay, well, let me pluck off one of those things. So you pluck off email marketing. And then you think, okay, well, now that I'm going to focus on email marketing, what do I need to do? Like if I were to do email marketing for someone and that was going to result in an increase in their revenue, what would the components of that service look like? And then you would think, well, I guess one of the first things I need to do is get comfortable inside of some kind of a email marketing platform, like maybe MailChimp, or like I use MailerLite a lot. So you say, okay, well, let me learn how MailerLite works. So you get a MailerLite account, you start playing around, you kind of fiddle around a little bit, work on the automations aspects. So you could do like email drip campaigns from that, and trigger which message goes out based on how people interact with the previous message, and kind of just feel really good about the tool itself. And then you say, okay, well, now that I feel good about that, I need to be able to get people to sign up. So then you pluck off the next skill, which is how do I put an opt-in form on my website? And then you pluck off another skill, which is how do I get people to actually use the opt-in form? Like, what's my lead magnet going to be like? And so you just kind of iterate through all the things that you would need to do to be really good at email marketing. And you just take a small step, make an incremental improvement, and then make the next one, and then make the next one. And then before you know it, you're going to feel awesome about email marketing. And that would be one of the things that you would be doing to help your client generate $100,000 of revenue into their business. It's not all the things, it's just one of the things. But once you have that thing, then here's what you can do. You don't have to wait until you have all the things. Reach out to a client or either a past client or a new client and offer this new skill set to them and say, hey, let me do email marketing for you. And then you've got a client doing that. So now you're making revenue as you're building your skill set and kind of doing it incrementally. And then you pluck off the next thing that you would do, like maybe funnels or landing pages or whatever, and you do the same. You just kind of repeat the same process. And then when you start feeling pretty good about your funnels or whatever, then you say, hey, maybe I'll reach out to the email marketing client I've got, or maybe I'll reach out to a new client and offer both things, email marketing and funnels. And then the next thing you add another and another, and then you got 4 or 5 things that you're doing, and then that's basically the package that would allow your clients to start making $100,000 of revenue because of you. And you're making these small incremental improvements, and before you know it, you've got clients saying, "Oh wow, thank God for you, because I just made 6 figures this year that I wouldn't have had unless you've been helping me with that." And that's basically how you can take imposter syndrome and just turn it into a blueprint for success by plucking off the individual skills that you need, making incremental improvements towards those skills, and then you can say to yourself, "Look, I do have a client. I have lots of clients that can say I've helped them add $100,000 to my business." So that's how, especially as web designers, we can take this kind of ingrained imposter syndrome that everybody's got, but rather than having that be something that holds you back or stands in your way of making forward progress, it's something that you can use to actually crush it. It's like a blueprint for success based on the patterns that we just talked about today. So if you liked this episode, then subscribe to the podcast. And if you could just leave a comment down below, if you're watching on YouTube, just leave a comment, like the channel. That stuff makes me really happy. So that'd be awesome if you could do that. And if you have any questions or if you have any examples of how you've overcome imposter syndrome, like put that in the comments too. And we can even have just a conversation going back and forth through the comments. So try that out. And if you have any other questions, just let me know. And if there's anything else I can do to support you, just let me know how I can help. And I look forward to catching up with you guys next week.